Intros. Bad. And we are live. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Corey, and I am with Vroman's Bookstore. And tonight we have the pleasure of hosting authors Jessica Goodman and Karen McManus. They're going to be discussing They'll Never Catch Us. Before we get going, if you've yet to purchase the book, at the bottom of the screen, there is a purchase book button. I like pushing buttons. I hope you do too. So push the button and buy the book. There's also a ask a question icon, or it's another little button you can push to ask questions for the Q&A tonight. Please put your questions there, and we'll get to them. Let's introduce our guests. Karen McManus is a #1 New York Times, USA Today, and international best-selling author of of many young adult thrillers, including The Cousins and You'll Be the Death of Me. She lives in Massachusetts and holds a master's degree in journalism from Northeastern University, which she mostly uses to draft fake news stories for her novels. I love that.
Accurate.
That's so cool. And then Jessica Goodman is the former OPED editor at the Cosmopolitan magazine and was part of the 2017 team that won a National Magazine Award in personal service. She has also held editorial positions with Entertainment Weekly and HuffPost. She is the indie-bound best-selling author of the young adult thrillers They Wish They Were With Us, and, as tonight, They'll Never Catch Us. They are from Razorbill and Penguin Team. Okay, I'll hand it off to you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hey, Jess. Happy book birthday week.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this and being here. I'm so excited to chat with you.
It is my pleasure. I've been so excited to talk about this book. I loved getting my beautiful finished copy of this book, especially because it came with pink sneakers to match the cover, which was probably the coolest mailing I have ever gotten.
all the kudos have to go to the Penguin Teen marketing team, who are geniuses. And when they came to me with that idea, I was just like, yes, absolutely. And we have to get a pair to Karen.
I wear them all the time. So thank you.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
Okay, so first of all, how about just give us the elevator pitch for They'll Never Catch Us. What's it about?
Yes, here we go. Okay, I've been doing this all week, so hopefully
you should have it nailed by now.
I know. God, I hope it. Okay, here we go. So They'll Never Catch Us follows two sisters, Stella and Ellie Steckler, who are hyper-competitive cross-country stars in the small town of Edgewater, New York, in the Catskills. And they are both competing to be the #1 runner on their team and win a college scholarship because their family can only afford to send one of them to college. But everything kind of gets upended when a new girl, Mila, comes to town and threatens to be better than both of them. And the sisters form intimate and intense relationships with her. And it kind of all bubbles over when Mila goes missing. She disappears, and everyone thinks that the Steckler sisters had something to do with it because they're also competitive with one another. So it's a story, it's kind of a whodunit of what happened to Mila, but it's also a story about young female athletes and the kind of neat little boxes that we try to put them in, and the dangerous pursuit of perfection in this way.
I loved reading this, especially right now before the Olympics, when we are seeing so many of these incredible young athletes competing, and also seeing, what some of the pressure can do to people who are trying to work at this level consistently. So it was really interesting timing. And I just wonder, what was the inspiration for it? What was the, I guess, inspiration for the book itself, and also why elite runners, or was it the exact same thing? Was it the same spark of inspiration?
Yeah, totally. Well, it's so interesting that this book is coming out right now because obviously the Olympics have been postponed since last year, and we had no idea that it was going to kind of coincide at the same time. But it is really interesting timing, especially because we're seeing, these elite athletes like Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka come out and really prioritize their mental health above everything else. And I think that it's just so cool and something that I don't think I could have expected a couple years ago when I started working on this book. But the idea really came about in like 2017 or so when I was an editor at Cosmo. And there was kind of this like whole like trend or just like spate of women who would go running, go jogging, and then they would disappear or be hurt or be murdered. And this just kept happening over and over and over again. And obviously this was nothing new. This has definitely happened before, but it was just covered on such a large national scale. And the intense publicity that these cases really garnered, it got to us at Cosmo and we were writing about it a lot. And I just started to become obsessed with this idea about how unfair it was for young women who just wanted to go out and do something that was good for them. Running is something that's healthy and it makes you happy and it can relieve a lot of anxiety and stress. And it just felt so unfair to me that the thing that can make young women feel the freest and the strongest might also be the thing that gets them hurt or that gets them killed. And I just couldn't shake this idea. And so that's where that's where the idea kind of started from. And then once I started working on it, a lot of the other themes came into play. But I think whenever, I'm not a runner personally, actually, like I hate running. So I had to do sorry.
I was going to ask, was that your research for this? Did you have to like start jogging?
I did. I tried really hard and it just like really wasn't for me, but I read a lot about running and thankfully my editor is a runner. So she was like very helpful with this, but I was just obsessed with this idea that like something that should be so good and for you personally can also just be so intensely like performative in a way that like that pressure to perform can break the spirit of what makes you happy too. So it was kind of a lot of things like coming at like once I cracked open this idea, I felt like there was a lot of room to play around in and a lot of like deep themes to discuss while also trying to create like a very entertaining, fast-paced, like high stakes thriller.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things about it was the fact that you do have these two sisters who are both competitive runners. They're on the same team. One of them is much more decorated than the other, but the younger one, she's coming up, and she's someone to keep an eye on. So there's this competition between them. And I personally love writing sister relationships. It's one of my favorite dynamics to create. There's just so many different ways that you can go. So I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about this sister, relationship, sister rivalry, and what kind of ultimately you wanted to say about these two sisters.
Yeah, well, first of all, I love the sisters that you've written too. Like the Rojas sisters are some of my favorites. I think I love them. Yeah. But yeah, I think for me, I really wanted to create a dynamic that felt really authentic because my pet peeve about sister books or sister movies is when they're so flat and that there's no nuance other than like we're there for each other. And like that is 100%. I think that is the point of this sisterly relationship. Like they are there for each other through really, really difficult, awful times, but there is a lot of tension between them. And there's a lot of, I think there are a lot of layers, or that's what I tried to include, that, they can fight in ways that are really, really painful. But at the end of the day, they still come back and really love each other and are there for each other. But I really wanted them to find conflict with one another because their relationship isn't always steady and they do things that really hurt each other. But I think the great thing about sibling relationships and sister relationships specifically is that they do find ways to heal and mend. And I think that was like the most important part for me in this book, to show healthy ways of fighting or healthy ways of like coming back together, because I think that's really important for young women to see that you can fight and be mad at each other, but also at the end of the day, like still love each other and like come back to one another.
Yeah, and have each other's backs, like you say.
Yeah.
No spoilers, but there are some moments in the book when they really need to have each other's backs.
Yes.
Do you have a sister too? Do you have a sister?
I do. She's
18.
She's 18 months older than I am. So we've been
very
similar. Yeah, we've been very close in age and proximity like our whole lives. So yeah, I've just always been fascinated by like the sister dynamic. And, you know, my friends who have sisters too, we talk about this all the time. Like it's just a bond like no other, you know, like your sister is like the only person in the world who has gone through, like, who's lived in like the same house as you have and like experienced the same things that you have. And I'm just so interested in the ways that that manifests, like in similarities and in differences. And especially with the Steckler sisters, like in their case, they've both been through family trauma, you know, like their parents have a dark past, like their mother is a recovering alcoholic, and both of these sisters deal with that in very different ways. Like they've had very different responses to this kind of trauma. And it was really important for me, or something I was really interested in, was playing around with the ways that they deal with that trauma and how their responses are so different.
Yeah, and that's the way you did that was through switching points of view between the two sisters. So we get to hear from Stella, and then we get from Ellie, and like back and forth. So your first book was single POV. So I'm curious, you know, how was it going to two narrators? What did you like? Was there anything you didn't like? And would you do it again?
Well, Karen, I mean, you are like the queen of multiple POVs. How, like,
I'm just waiting for you to say it was the greatest experience ever. Well, and I never again write a single POV.
Oh my God. How many POVs is your biggest POV book? 4? Have you done more?
One of us is lying. It was 4, which I will probably never do again. That was a lot.
Because One of Us is Next is 3, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the least I've ever done is 2.
Yes. And The Cousins is 3 also, right? Yeah. Oh my God, Karen, it's so hard. It's so hard. But I mean, I really wanted to challenge myself with this. Like I didn't see another way to write this story with one POV, because I wanted to give each sister equal weight. Like they are both main characters in my opinion. And I really wanted to be able to see the same events from both of their perspectives. And actually, like the thing I love about your book is, or all of your books, is that like you can pick it up on any chapter. And like, if you've read a couple chapters of each person, like, you know exactly who you're reading. And I think that is like, that's like the best kind of POV writing, where you're like, okay, like I know who's speaking right now. And I don't even need to like see the name at the top. But for this book, it was really hard to do that because they're sisters. And so like they do have very similar voices and, you know, ways of speaking and tone, and not really tone, but like they just use the same phrases a lot, or they kind of like are, you know, the same, their family. So it was really hard for me to switch to like make sure that their voices were really like distinct from one another. I tried really hard to work on that. And it was something that we worked on like in every single draft. So hopefully it works, but I really had so much fun.
I thought they had very distinct voices.
Oh, good. Oh, okay, yeah. Great. Well, I'm glad to hear that. But it was hard. And I will say that my third book that I'm working on is 1 POV, but a work in progress that I'm working on is 3. So I think I might have caught the bug.
Come over to the multi-POV side, Jess. It's fun over here.
It is. I will say that the one that I'm working on that has 3, I'm having a lot of fun with it because the characters are really, really different. And I was like, oh, I can see if the characters are like total opposites and like not related and like from very different worlds. Like this is so fun to write. So I can see why you do this.
It gets a little addictive. And I think especially for thrillers and mysteries, it's fun because you can kind of take your reader to this edge of a reveal. And then you just switch and you go someplace else, and you can really tease things out that way.
Well, that's what I love.
Longer than you can with single POV.
That's what I love about your books is like you kind of leave stuff on cliffhangers at the end of chapters, and it's like so fun. It's so fun to not know stuff, but you can also hide things from the other characters. Like, you know, you like, but you can keep it like you can include the readers while not like letting the other characters in. And that, I mean, you could just do like, it's just, there's way more opportunity there. I think I've really like come to understand why it works so well.
Yeah, there's some pluses to it. You know, the minus being you get 3 or 4, however many whole people you've got to flesh out, you know, give them their own individual hopes and dreams and backstories and friends. And it's a lot. And at least you did have the same family in this one. But I think the way that they experience, you know, you talked a little about about their family situation. And even with a relatively small age difference between them, they experience things differently, because when you're kids, a year and a half is a big difference. So that was really interesting.
Yeah. Wait, I have a question for you about POVs, if that's okay.
Yeah.
When you're drafting them, do you make like timelines for each person and try to like track all the POVs at this, like on a map at the same time to see where everything lines up?
I do kind of like, I do this outline where I kind of do the big beats of the story. And then I sort of list out every character and like their emotional beats that I know I want them to hit at some point. And I try to figure out, where I can place that within the story. And it's really loose at the beginning. It gets much more detailed as I go along and get to know them better, and the story starts taking shape. But I do outline. I'm not that visual of a person, so I don't really like map anything, but I kind of, it's just a big bulleted list of, okay, Bronwyn needs to do X and Cooper needs to learn Y. And, also around this time, they should probably be, they should have a clue or something. So, whose POV should I be in? Who's the most affected by whatever's happening? And that's tricky too. Sometimes you're trying to go in order, but you just can't, because somebody's point of view is more important. So you just double up or you go out of order.
I think coming to terms with that, the fact that you could go out of order was really hard for me, because there are a few chapters in the book where it's like Stella and then Stella, or like Ellie and then Ellie. And like realizing that I could give myself permission to do that was like having a light bulb go off. I was like, oh, wait, like this would be so much more interesting coming from, Stella's perspective. Like, I'm in charge here. I guess I can do that. Like,
and that's it. Like, your structure needs to serve the plot, not the other way around. So you just can't force it. And You'll Be the Death of Me is the first time I ever did 3 chapters from one POV all in a row. But I just had to. This like one character was just really pivotal that would be in their head. So they're short chapters. Hopefully it's okay.
You're in charge. Why not?
Right. I'm the boss. We're the boss. So did you have a favorite scene to write? Again, like non-spoilery, but was there anything, like, sometimes when I'm writing and I'm outlining, I know there's something coming up that I'm excited to write. And so that gets me through some of the, like, when it feels like a slog sometimes. Was there anything you were like super excited about getting to?
Yeah, I think my favorite scene to write, it happens really early in the book. It's when Stella and Ellie are reunited for the first time. So the book starts with Stella being at this kind of like anger management track camp that she is sent to after, participating in a violent incident the year before. Like, her punishment is that she has to like go to this camp and learn anger management. It's kind of like school mandated, basically. And when she returns home, she has this very kind of tense and strained reunion with her younger sister, Ellie. And I really wanted that to, like, I really enjoyed writing that, because I wanted them to both be seeming kind of aloof and like not really excited, like not really showing that they were excited to see each other, but be very excited to see each other, like under the surface, and like trying that, like, you could see them both keeping secrets from each other, but also like reaching out and wanting to be close. And I think that like really captured like a teenage girl dynamic for me, where it's like, you're so close to someone, but sometimes you don't really want to show it, or like you want to hide it a little bit. And I had a lot of fun writing that, because also you start in Stella's perspective and you see very, very early on that she is very self-conscious, and she's very, she's not very comfortable with herself in the beginning of the book. But when Ellie sees her for the first time, she assumes that she's like so confident and like, has all this bravado and stuff. And so I really wanted to show that these girls know everything about each other because they're sisters, but there are still a few secrets that they're keeping each other that are very, internal. And by the end of the book, I think they come around on a lot of those secrets. But in the beginning, you can really feel like intense tension between them, I think.
Yeah, that was really well done. I'll tell you my favorite non-spoilery scene, because some of them are too spoilery to talk about here. But there's this one point where they're at this meet and it's just supposed to be like ceremonial, kind of, right?
Yeah.
And you're just supposed to like phone in your race, and Stella just goes for it and she smashes her record, and everyone's just like, what are you doing? I thought that was such a great character moment for her. And I'm wondering, were either of them like easier to write, harder to write? Like, Stella to me seems like, you know, she's such a strong character, and Ellie is too, but like her strength is almost sneakier the way it comes out. And maybe, I don't know if that was harder to pull out of her, or if you felt really comfortable inside her head from the beginning.
Yeah, I think Stella was easier to write. And I think that's because she's so insular. Like she's just like all of it is just her, and the way that she interacts with people was so obvious to me. I just knew from the beginning, like the way that she would interact with other people, and what her reactions would be to people. And Ellie was a little trickier for me because she's so obsessed with what people think about her, and she's very interested in status and being well liked, but she does a lot of things that are not likable and like that make people don't like her, but she thinks that she should be like popular in a lot of ways. And so I think her motivations were always just a little bit trickier and a little more nuanced for me, where Stella it was very clear what she wanted, what her goals were. And Ellie's were a little bit more like mushy around the edges, I think. But they were really fun because they were just they felt really different to me. And I really liked being able to move back and forth. But yeah, Stella's came easier, which was surprising because I'm a younger sister. So I was like, oh, the younger sister will be way easier to write, but she was not. She escaped me a little.
There's something magical about characters who just know what they want. That kind of character does have a strong voice often. I find like Nate Macaulay in One of Us is Lying was the easiest character to write, and I didn't think he would be. I'd never tried to write a male point of view before I wrote Nate, and he just like flowed because he was just who he was, and I always knew what he was going to do or say in any given situation. And that's a character you come to appreciate when you're doing multi-POV, because some of them come a little, takes a little longer.
Totally. I really admire the way that you write teenage boys, especially from their own POVs, because that's something I really, really struggle with. But yeah, you do it so well. And I mean, I fall in love with all of your teenage boy characters.
They're all so sweet. Sort of,
I know.
Some of them more so than others.
They are.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about the setting, because we haven't really talked about this small town yet of Edgewater. So it's a little bit of a dead-end town, right? It's got some secrets. It's got a past. So talk to us about that and, why it was important to set the story someplace like Edgewater. Yeah,
I really wanted to set this book in a small town that was on the decline. I'd spent like a bunch of time in the Catskills, which are just north of New York City, where I live. And I just kind of fell in love with the area. I think it's so beautiful. It's so, it's just like all this nature and stuff. But there is a really interesting dynamic in the region, which is that it's becoming gentrified like rapidly by a lot of people from New York, like buying second homes up there or moving up there and, bringing these things that they think are really wonderful additions to towns, like fancy coffee shops and natural wine shops and, really fancy restaurants and all the kind of typical markers of gentrification, without really thinking about what the towns that they're inhabiting need or want, or what the communities are like that they're really stepping into. And obviously this has accelerated a lot during the pandemic, which is interesting because I wrote the book before the pandemic. But I think I was just obsessed with this kind of dynamic and the tension within these towns. And so I wanted to write about a town that was kind of going through an identity crisis, but also has this like dark past that looms over everything. So, when we start the book, you find out pretty early on that a decade before there were a bunch of cold cases where 3 female cross-country runners from the town were murdered and their killer was never found. And so there is this kind of like should girls run, but they have to run because that like this is the best cross country team in the state basically. And so again, this was all part of the tension of like, if you do something that makes you feel really strong, it's also something that could get you hurt. Like that played into that a lot when I was working on it. But so, yeah, I think with the region, I was just so interested in this from like a sociopolitical perspective. And then everything else just like kind of came out from there. I mean, I love small town settings. I love like creepy mountain towns for thrillers. Like, and I've also always been really interested in stories that are set in like vacation towns in the off season. Yes. I just think it's so freaky and spooky, you know, like what happens when all the, you know, non-locals are gone? Like what happens when it's just locals, you know, like what are these, what do they really get up to? And I particularly love them in like beach town settings. Like I think those are so fun. But you know, in this Catskill town, it's like certainly a summer town where people come, you know, for tourist season. They come to like, you know, leaf peep and apple pick, but they don't really care about what's actually going on in Edgewater. They don't care about the, you know, the fact that these girls might be murdered. They just want to, you know, pick apples and drink cider, which sounds nice, but it's, you know,
it does sound nice. Yeah.
Not the central theme of the book.
Well, I thought it was interesting too, because the way you wove in her parents, like they sell real estate. So they are in a sense catering to some of these people who are coming in and like snapping up homes. That's their family business. But they're also very like woven into the fabric of the town. So I thought that was a really interesting way to bring the setting in to their family. And especially with a past like theirs, you know, you mentioned the mom having gone through rehab. It's like always a worry for a child that, well, will this repeat itself? So if, you know, maybe you don't want the town to change, but you also really want your parents to keep selling houses. So, you know, there's a lot to think about as a kid.
Totally. And one of my favorite set pieces that I got to write was this Elacoya mountain resort, which is I basically wrote like my dream luxury hotel resort kind of situation. You know, it has like 1 million A-frame cabins and a lake and tennis courts and a wedding venue and a farm to table restaurant. And that's kind of like the centerpiece of the town and the economic engine of the town. So basically everything works like around this resort, you know, and like the Steckler parents that, like you said, they sell real estate and they are always trying to like gussy up to the owners of the Elacoya resort who can like put them in touch with tourists who want to buy in the area and all this stuff. Right. And I just had so much fun writing that because I've always been interested in like the, you know, the Dirty Dancing era Catskills resorts.
Yes.
And I kind of based it off of like, if those were alive and kicking now and in their heyday, like what would they look like? So, I mean, it's just like so much fun to play around with stuff like that.
Yeah, I love that. I would book absolutely a weekend at Elacoya.
Yeah. My agent kept being like, can we start this? Can we go there?
So let's talk a little bit about the mystery itself and how you go about building it. You know, what kind of thriller writer are you? Are you a heavy outliner? Are you, you know, someone who knows exactly where the story is going and how you're going to get there? What's your process like?
Oh man, I'm kind of like a half plotter, half pantser.
Me too.
Which basically means that like I always try my hardest to write an outline. It usually consists of about like a pretty somewhat fleshed out first act, like where I know where the story is going, the premise, what's happening, a really saggy middle with like, you know,
middles are so awful.
Middles are so awful. Maybe just like a paragraph that's like, you know, they get caught or like something happens. And then I usually know where I want to end. Like I know who the big bad is. I might know what kind of big final twist I want. But I really find that I get to know the characters in the story through writing and through just like working through the characters in the story.
Yeah.
So often I find that when I outline, I usually have to go back and then like readjust the outline based on what I actually wrote. And then sometimes I just end up throwing out the outline completely. But With this book, I remember I sent my editor like maybe like 7-page outline that I thought was like pretty extensive. And I was like, oh, I did it. I wrote an outline, like, here we go. And she was like, okay, yes, like go forth. Like we talked about it a little bit. And then I started writing, and, the outline did not help me at all. Like I realized I realized if I had followed the outline, I would have like half a book, So I really had to kind of like go back and start, just kind of like see where the story took me. And what I have come to view as my process is just to like write as much as I can to get to the words the end, leave as many blanks and come back here's and fill this in laters as possible. And then once I have, a very messy zero draft or vomit draft or whatever, it's much easier for me to then fill it in and tie up plot holes and go back in and fix everything. Is that similar to how you work?
It is. Yeah. I always outline. I do. And it can be a decent size outline, but similarly for my 6th book, it was the most intense outline I'd ever done. I was like, this book is going to be so easy to write. And I got, I got halfway through it and it just wasn't clicking. And I didn't know why, because the mystery was fine. And then, I tried all these different things, and it finally hit me that the characters were all wrong. And I completely changed the characters. So 2 totally different people. It was one of those weekends where I was like that guy, in front of the red board, the murder board, and you're trying to explain all these different things. And I'm trying to explain stuff to my agent. And I was like, okay, now read this. No, don't read it. Don't read that. That was terrible. I did something new. No, don't read this either. We did that for about 2 weeks, and I finally figured it out. So, but then like the Cousins was super easy to write. That I always knew exactly where I wanted to end, and that's where I ended. And I always knew who the characters were, and that's who they stayed. So you don't know. Sometimes it's the outline works, and sometimes you gotta throw it out and start over.
I feel like each book is like a different beast. It's like different challenges come with each one. And I've heard you talk about how your 2nd book was like so hard for you to write as well. And having written my 2nd book and finding it very difficult, I concur. What is it about 2nd books?
That was, in fact, my next question for you. I believe the exact question was, did your 2nd book almost kill you? Because mine almost killed me. It's really hard.
It's so hard.
I think part of it is because, suddenly you have a lot of people waiting for this book. Your agent is waiting, your editor is waiting. Hopefully your readers are waiting, they're excited for it. So that kind of like messes with your mind a little bit. You usually have to write it on deadline, which you didn't have with the first book. And also just like the way publishing is, like they want you to be pretty similar to what you did before so that people will recognize you, but not too similar because, that's disappointing. So it's just this very fine line that it's hard to navigate.
Yeah, I found it really difficult, and I couldn't tell if it was because of the pandemic or just because it's hard. But I think it's really hard. And I think similarly, like you write your first book in a vacuum and you're just kind of doing it for yourself. And it's just very, intimate and exciting because you don't know what can happen. And when I was working on my 2nd book, I felt a lot of pressure and, I was worried about expectations and making, not letting anyone down. And also like writing a book that it was like, can I do this again?
Right.
And can I do it in 4 months? And the answer was yes, and sort of,
Yes, you did. But I try to be very like transparent about how hard it was for me because it was very helpful for me to hear from authors I admired. And Becky Albertalli in particular was so open about 2nd book syndrome. And it really did help me think that, okay, other people have done this and they created a great book. So hopefully I can do it too. But it's hard. And adding the pandemic is like,
I know. Well, definitely hearing you talk about it made me feel better. And, I did get the first draft done before the pandemic. And then I remember exactly where I was when I got my edits back, like my first edits, because it was like March 9th or something, like I had like just gotten them back and I had been sent home from my office at the time because of the pandemic. And I remember talking to my editor and I was like, oh, I'm I'm so excited to get to work on this because I'm going to have 2 hours of time left because I'm not going to be commuting. It's going to be great.
Oh, you sweet summer child.
I know. I was so naive. But it worked out fine. Sort of.
So, and of course, you were still working your day job then. You have a journalism background. I semi have a journalism background. I have a degree that I have never actually used. So I'm curious, like, how your work has kind of, informed your storytelling or just your work process.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a very fast writer. Like I can bang stuff out, and I work very well on deadline. And I think that I can definitely attribute that to working in digital media specifically. Like when I started working at HuffPost in 2013, I was writing 10 blog posts a day. And you're just cranking out content. Yeah, you're just cranking out content like nobody's business. And you just get really fast. You just get really, really fast. Not always good, but it's fast. And I think that helps a lot. And also, I think I know, like I'm good at being edited. Like I love to collaborate and I love to talk stuff out. And I'm really not precious about my work or my words. And I really am in pursuit of trying to make it the best it can be. And I understand that a lot of times like that doesn't come from just my brain. It kind of takes a village to get there. And I really like being edited. And I think that has been really helpful for me, especially writing thrillers. And, oftentimes I need to ask about plot and, pacing and all that stuff. And I love like working with other people for that kind of thing. So it's been helpful. And just from like a totally, like business point of view or just like non-writing point of view, like I think it has made me quite savvy in like the media and publicity arm of this work, you know, which is totally part of the job. And so I'm really grateful for, knowing like what publications are interested in terms of book coverage and in terms of like how they like to work with authors. When I was an editor at Cosmo, I commissioned you to write a list of books for us about, like escapist books. Cause I was like, oh my God, this is like such a cool time for when the Cousins was coming out. And it was just like, I felt like it was a great opportunity to like talk about the Cousins and also like a lot of other cool books that were coming out. So I was so excited that you got to do that for us, or that you agreed to do that for us, I should say.
It was fun for me too, because it was that time of year, like the end of 2020, when we were all just tired, and just needed something happy and fun and enjoyable. So to gush about some books I loved was just a perfect intro to, a book that I loved to write.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad. But it's so funny in your bio how you say, that you use your journalism career to write fake news stories. And I think that's super legit because I did that a little bit in this book too. And I really appreciate when I think because I have a journalism background, I really appreciate when books like get that stuff right, because so often like they don't, and it's like a little pet peeve of mine, but yours definitely get them right, obviously.
Oh, good. No, I'm fascinated by media attention, and how it sort of like focuses in one place, almost like a tidal wave, and then it washes away and what's left behind. So there's almost always some kind of element of that in my stories, is that you're caught up in something. It's very big, it's very overwhelming. And, how do you act when that spotlight is on you? I find that really interesting.
I think it also raises the stakes a lot too. Like when when your characters know that other people are watching, like when the Bayview Four realized that like the whole world is coming in and looking at what's happening. It's like, as a reader, you're like, oh my God, like you know exactly what kind of news story this is, because we've all lived through that.
We've all seen it.
Yeah, exactly. So you're like, oh my God, I wonder what it is like to be at the middle of that. Yeah.
So speaking of spotlights, let's talk some TV stuff. Can we do that with your first book? Because that is in development. Can you share any updates, or even just tell for people who might not know what that's all about?
Yeah, so my first book is called They Wish They Were Us, and it's a prep school murder mystery that involves secret societies and hazing rituals and murder and Gossip Girl-like drama. And it's currently in development to be a limited series at HBO Max, which is very cool. And it's set to star Sydney Sweeney, who you might know from The White Lotus, which I'm like loving right now. It's so fun. And Halsey is set to star in it too, which is very, very cool.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I'm really excited, and hopefully we'll get to see it on our small screens soon. But also, maybe we could talk about your TV show, which is coming down the pike way faster, and you might see some promos for it if you're watching the Olympics gymnastics final in the background right now.
Yes, that was pretty exciting. There's it's the One of Us is Lying show is set to be streaming on Peacock soon. That's all we're allowed to say, that it's coming soon. Yeah, but so during the Olympics, they've been running some promos for some of their original shows, and One of Us is Lying has been included in that, which has been really fun to see. You know, like people I haven't talked to in years are suddenly, you know, finding me on Facebook and saying, "Is that your book?" So yeah, that's actually still shooting right now in New Zealand. So they've been shooting since I think maybe May or so. And so like I've seen scripts, I've started to see some of the rough cuts, which is pretty exciting. And yeah, they're it's going to be a real thing relatively soon.
What has it been like to see the characters that you created in your brain like come to life on a screen in front of you?
It's so surreal. It really is.
Yeah.
It's exciting, you know, and the cast is so talented. You know, it's a big ensemble, not just the main four characters, but there are side characters who, you know, had big roles in the book and, you know, have even bigger roles on the television screen. So really it's, you know, 8-10 young actors all working together to bring this story to life. And to see the chemistry between them on screen has been great, but also to see them hanging out and having fun on social media. You know, like I can't be there for the shoot because, you know, COVID, but I get to see some of it, you know, via Instagram, and it just seems like they're having a great time. And I think that comes across on screen.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I can't wait to watch.
Yeah. Hopefully more information about that soon. So I know we have a bunch of questions and I should get to those. But before I do, I just want to ask, what is next for you? What can you share anything about book 3?
Yes, we just announced it last week, which is really exciting. So my third book is called The Counselors, and it is, okay, this is my elevator pitch that I haven't refined yet, but hopefully it works.
You can practice here.
I can practice. This is a safe space. So The Counselors follows Goldie Easton, who is she lives in a small town in Vermont, and she, for her whole life, has been going to a very exclusive summer camp that her parents have been working at for her whole life. And so she has been able to go there for free when everybody else at the camp is kind of this like hoity-toity, like Upper East Side Manhattan kind of person. And Goldie has 2 best friends who are very fancy New York City girls, but they, you know, they treat her like an equal, and they've been best friends their whole life. But they start the summer where they're going to be lifeguards and counselors. They start the summer and Goldie is keeping this big secret from everybody, including her best friends. And she, you know, is very aloof and is not, you know, sharing anything with them. And then very soon after the book starts, her ex-boyfriend winds up dead on camp, and he's a local kid from Vermont as well. And so the book unfolds as a whodunit of who killed this ex-boyfriend of hers, and what kind of secrets is she keeping, and what darkness lies at this camp. So that's the book.
Summer camp books are among my favorites. I can't wait to see what havoc you wreak in that setting.
I was such a sleepaway camp kid, and it's been so fun to kind of wade in this pool, and it's been like my pandemic happy place.
And what's it called again?
The Counselors.
The Counselors.
Yes.
Perfect.
Similar to the Cousins.
The Cousins. I know. I like it.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Let me start asking you some questions from our audience here. So,
okay.
Did you, and then we sort of touched on this, but maybe not specifically, did you know the ending of the book when you started writing? And if not, how many times did you change it?
Oh my gosh. I had a vague idea of the ending when I first started the book, but pretty soon after I started writing, I knew exactly who the killer would be and how we would get there. And I knew that I wanted it to be a big surprise. And so I wanted to feel like a real twist. And so I kind of worked my way backwards from there in order to make sure that it felt really surprising.
It did. Mission accomplished.
Good. Good.
So what made you want to write thrillers, especially in the YA genre?
Oh my gosh. I think they're the kind of stories that I love to read just as a consumer and just as a reader. Like I'm always drawn to thrillers. And I think my gateway drug was Gillian Flynn, like I read Gone Girl and I just was like, oh my God, like this is everything. And I think growing up, I read a lot of contemporary and I read a lot of like dark contemporary, but I didn't really find thrillers until, later in my life. And once I kind of like got a little taste of them, I was like, well, this is exactly what I want to write and what I want to read. And I've always been interested in true crime. And, I started watching Law & Order SVU and I was like way too young to be watching it. So once I started realizing that people could do this, I was like, oh, this is the space for me. This is where I want to play around in. And once I started reading more YA thrillers, I was like, oh, this feels like what my writing is. I could see my voice and my ideas like be on the shelves next to some of these books. But I'm curious, what about you? You're a big Agatha Christie fan, right?
Huge. Yeah, huge.
Yeah.
I also, I read like way too old when I was a kid. I was reading Stephen King when I was like 10 years old. I was always reading thrillers and horror. I was just naturally intrigued by that. But when I started writing, I was inspired by the Hunger Games. And so the first thing I ever wrote was like this very bad dystopian knockoff of, the Hunger Games, which went nowhere as it should have. And then I tried like this contemporary fantasy, which was, better, but still not great. And people kept telling me I should really just focus on contemporary, just get rid of the fantasy because world building is not my strength. And then I had the idea for One of Us is Lying. And I thought, oh, a mystery. I don't know. Like I've not tried this before, but I did have all those years of reading to kind of help me figure out what to do.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah.
All right. We talked a little bit about this, but what made you choose the Catskills as the setting?
Oh yeah, I think I really wanted to write a place that I'd been before and spent a lot of time in. And in my 20s and early 30s, like I have spent a bunch of time there, and it feels very familiar to me. And it just felt kind of like a dark, creepy place that is really beautiful, but has a lot of darkness in it. And it felt natural for me in that way. Yeah. Yeah.
I felt the same way about the cousin setting, because Gull Cove Island is made up, but it's meant to be like Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. And, what you were saying before about like, what is the community like when everybody leaves?
Yeah.
The book is set during the summer, so you're all there, but so much of it is about, what's it actually like on this island when everyone else is gone? What's this community like? And how is this family so prominent? And I think there's something just really interesting about insular communities.
I know. And I love like the locals only vibe. Like I just find that so interesting, and it's fun. It's really fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. That's some of the most fun parts to write, I think. So can you talk a little bit about your overall writing process?
Yeah. I think I talked a little bit about this, like with my plotting and pantsing situation, where I try to start an outline, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But for me, like everything starts with a premise, like a log line, basically. So like for They'll Never Catch Us, it was just like female runner goes missing, sisters are suspects. Like that was what I wanted the story to be. And for The Counselors, like my next book, it was basically just like local kid winds up dead at fancy summer camp. Like that like I was just like, that's the book, and like everything else comes out from that. And oftentimes the premise will come like way before I start doing anything, and I'll just kind of write it down and save it for a rainy day. Like I started working on The Counselors like maybe a year ago, and like I think a very long time ago, just like kind of in between stuff, but it was just like that one log line really. And then everything kind of goes from there.
That's so interesting. That's exactly what I do.
Really?
It's like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
one line, like The Breakfast Club with murder,
Yeah.
you know, or like, you know, missing girls don't come home in Echo Ridge. And like, I don't actually know what that means. I just
Yes.
know that I can probably build a story around it. So it's like hook first, characters second, plot third is my usual process. And if I can't sum it up in a sentence, I feel like it would be too easy for me to go off course. Like I need to know at the core, what is this book about? You know, and if I can say that like super fast, then I'm probably going to be able to, you know, maintain that focus. And if I can't, like that was the thing with my first two books, people would say, what's it about? And I'm like, oh, well, it's like, and it would take me 5 minutes to just explain the basic, because there was no core concept to hang on to. So I think that hook is really important.
That's a good self-test also, like if you're playing around with ideas, to be like, can I do it in one line? You know, like, can this make sense to somebody who is like dropped down on earth, you know? Like, I think that's a good test.
And of course, there's way more to it, you know, once you get to all your incredible subtle plot points, but.
Yes.
Interesting question. How do you come up with your character's physical appearance? Do you get inspired by someone real, someone you know, or do you just have a clear idea from the start how you want them to look like?
Physical appearance, I think, is some of my weakest writing. I very rarely include physical description in the first drafts of my book. And then my editor will come back, or my agent, and will be like, what does this person look like? What color hair do they have? Like, how tall are they? And I'm like, oh, right. Like, I guess I should mention that at some point. So I kind of just have blurry people. I really do. And I often have to, study pictures of people and be like, what are attributes? Like, how do chins look? And, you know, I'm like, what can I say about this person? Do they so it's really hard for me. It's something I actually have to like think about. Whereas a lot of other stuff just kind of flows. How about you?
Yeah. You know, because I write multi-POV, I do think about appearances early on, just because I want the reader to be able to picture them distinct from one another, you know, so I don't want to have 3 blonde people. So you know, try to make sure that they are somewhat distinct looking. And I do like character worksheets, and I do little things like, you know, what's their most, you know, the thing about their appearance that would most catch someone's attention, you know, because that is something that people can hook on to. So it doesn't have to be a big thing, but, you know, is there one thing that you can like mention early on, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, she's like that. So, but I'm like you with settings, you know, like I don't describe how anything looks at the beginning. Nothing. It's all dialogue and
that's so funny. It's when I was working on They Wish They Were Us, I think I just like forgot how to like what people look like, or like what kind of physical description you could put in at all. And I ended up making all of the male characters have dimples. And my editor was like, very kindly, she was like, I think we have a few too many dimples in this book. And so I was like, yeah, I guess that was the only thing I could think of.
That is a very common YA attribute as well.
I know,
so.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I fell into the trap. Okay, yeah, only one male character will have dimples from now on.
Happens to the best of us. So was it difficult or easy to create the sexist characters and dialogue that the Steckler sisters face?
Very easy, because I think we see it consistently all the time in media, in articles, like on TV and movies. Like, if you're a young woman, you have faced this. You know, I have faced sexism, of course, in all parts of my life. And so it was very easy to recall and imagine the kinds of sexism that these girls would face. And I had a lot of fun writing their reactions, because you know, I could give them all the words that I felt like I never had.
Right.
And all the responses that I wish I had at the moment and didn't. And so that part's really fun.
Yeah, there's a little wish fulfillment there, right, with your characters sometimes.
Yeah, and I try to give them more agency than I felt like I had as a teenage girl. And I like to have my characters like uncover their own strengths when it comes to this kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So do you have a favorite writer who has come on the scene in the past 2-3 years, or anyone that you'd like to collaborate with?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I could like jointly write a book. I
don't know if I could either.
Yeah, like a 2-on-2, like a just me and one other person. I don't know if I could do that, but I mean, like I mean, in the YA space, like you and Tiffany D. Jackson, I think are like doing the best kinds of thrillers out there right now. Oh my God, her work is incredible. And it's just, it's so fun, the kind of YA thrillers that are coming out now too. Like Ace of Spades is amazing. I just finished that book, and like Firekeeper's Daughter is so good. Like the Good Girl, Bad Blood series, like Inheritance Games.
Games.
Yeah, like I feel like we're really living in like a golden age of like young adult thrillers. Like if you're into this, there's so much amazing stuff out there. It's so cool.
Yeah. I was super excited the other day because I got, the New York Times bestseller list, because one of us is #1. Yay. But also 6 of 10 books on there were young adult thrillers. And I don't think that has ever happened before, that more than half of the list was our genre. And so I think there's a lot of great authors working right now, and it's exciting. I don't know if I would be a great collaborator either. I feel like maybe I'm a little bit too much of a control freak and I might alienate my co-author. But like, I thought, Kathleen Glasgow and Liz Lawson are writing a mystery, and I know Kathleen really well, and it seemed like it was really fun, to have a co-author. So, maybe someday. I wouldn't rule it out.
Never say never. But yeah, I'm just like so happy to be a cheerleader, it's just so fun to read everybody's work and be like, oh my God, how did you do that? And now that like I know some of these people, I can text someone and be like, how did you do that?
Right.
I can actually get the answer. So it's very exciting.
Explain yourself. Okay, I think we have time for like maybe one more question, and this is always a great place to finish up, I think. What inspired you to start writing novels?
Oh my gosh.
Is this something that you have always wanted to do? Were you like one of those kids? I was one of those kids who in 2nd grade was writing books, but it took me a while to do it professionally. What about you?
I was definitely one of those kids, like trying to write picture books in 1st grade. Like I always knew I wanted to write, but I think for me, I didn't really know any authors. Like it didn't really seem like it was a possibility to become a book author. It seemed crazy to me. So I chose the path of journalism because I knew people who had made that into a profession. It seemed like more realistic to me. But I really thought about doing it professionally and trying to do it for real when I was an editor at Entertainment Weekly, and I was covering books like from a journalism perspective, and I was reporting on the book industry and learning what sold and what didn't sell, and just like what it actually took to sell a book and get an agent and all that stuff. And then I read Luckiest Girl Alive by Jessica Knoll, which is one of my favorite adult thrillers. It is fantastic. And I read a lot about the author, and I read some interviews with her, and she was an editor at Cosmopolitan, and she talked very openly about how she was able to do it and how she was able to set a schedule for herself. And she just made it very clear. She basically gave me an instruction manual that I like read in an interview she did. And when I got to Cosmopolitan, I was like, I'm going to follow in Jessica Knoll's footsteps and write a book and make it happen.
Okay.
And
you did.
And I did. And I have told her since then, I was like, this is because of you. And it's so funny. My mom like saw her on a clip on the Today Show, and she like sent it to me. And I was like, I know, she did it. She's the inspiration. So yeah, every chance I get, I tell her, I'm like, this is because of you.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
And now you're on, book 3 or, and even beyond that. So very cool.
It's very exciting. It's a good time, and I'm just so happy to be in your company and talk about all this stuff. It's just so exciting. It's nice. Yeah,
it is. And for any aspiring writers who might be listening to us, it's just great to know that you really can make this happen even when you have no idea what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And no connections and no, basis to start from. Perseverance is a really incredible tool.
Absolutely.
I think that's it.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. These questions were really, really good. Your discussion was really awesome and really inspiring for writers. So, yeah, thank you so much. And if you haven't purchased the book for tonight, get down there and press that little purchase book button. And thank you for showing up.
Thanks so much for hosting.
Yeah. Have a beautiful evening.
You too.
You too. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
All. Bye.